You already know what boundaries you need to set. You've known for a while. The problem isn't information. You know what needs to change. The problem is guilt, the fear of the reaction, the story that setting a boundary makes you difficult, selfish, or even unkind. Today, we are dismantling all of that, and I'm going to give you the exact framework for setting boundaries that actually hold. Hi, my name is Suzette. I'm a personal transformation and mindset coach. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood and most needed skills in personal development. They are talked about constantly and practiced not a lot. Because knowing you need one and actually setting one are separated by a gap that most people find very hard to cross. Let's close this gap today. A boundary is not a wall. It is not a punishment. It is not a demand that other people change. Boundaries are statements of what you will and will not do, the description of your own behavior, not a prescription for someone else's. This distinction is everything. Most people try to set boundaries as demands, which sound like you need to stop doing X. This almost always creates defensiveness and resistance because you are trying to control other people's behavior, which is both ineffective and not actually a boundary. A genuine boundary sounds like, when X happens, I will do Y, or I'm not available for that, or I won't be continuing this conversation while it's going in this direction. The boundary describes your action, not theirs. This reframe is liberating because it means you don't actually need the other person's cooperation to have a boundary. You just need the willingness to follow through on your own stated behavior. The other person can do whatever they like. Your boundary describes what you will do in response. A boundary does not need to be angry, dramatic, or issued as an ultimatum. The most effective boundaries are the ones stated calmly, clearly, as a matter of fact, and as a description of reality rather than a reaction to provocation. Let's talk about the guilt, because it is almost always the reason people don't follow through. Guilt in this context of a boundary usually comes from one of these three places. The first is a belief that your needs don't matter as much as other people's needs, that prioritizing yourself is inherently selfish, and that a good person puts others first. This belief is both very common and fundamentally flawed. You cannot sustainably give from an empty source. Setting a boundary to protect your energy, your time, or your well-being is not being selfish. It is sustainable generosity. People without boundaries often end up with resentment, which is far more damaging to relationships than the boundary would have been. The second source of guilt is the anticipated pain of the other person and sounds like, if I say no, they will be upset. Probably, and that's okay. You are not responsible for managing every emotional response your honesty produces in someone else. You are responsible for your own integrity and your own well-being. Causing someone temporary disappointment by being honest is not the same as harming them. The third source is the fear that the boundary will damage or end the relationship. And here's the honest truth. Some relationships cannot survive honesty. Some relationships exist only because one person consistently suppresses their need for the other. If a relationship cannot survive you having a boundary, that tells you something important about the relationship, something you would be better off knowing. Here is a 5-step framework I use with clients for setting a boundary that holds. Step 1. Get clear on the boundary before the conversation. What specifically do you need? Not a vague sense of, I need more respect, but a specific behavioral description that sounds like, I need our conversation to end before 10 p.m. I need a full 24-hour notice for any last-minute requests. I won't discuss my personal life at work. The more specific, the clearer it is to both parties. Step 2. Choose the right moment. Don't set a boundary in the heat of a conflict. Do it in a calm, private, unhurried moment. Setting a boundary when you are angry or reactive almost always makes it land as an attack rather than a statement of need. Step 3. State it simply and without over-explaining. You do not owe anyone lengthy justification for your needs. Over explaining is actually a form of apologizing, and it weakens the boundary. A simple, warm, clear statement is more powerful than an elaborate defense, and it sounds like this. I've realized that I need to keep my evenings free for myself. I will not be available by phone after 8 p.m. That's all that you need to say. Step 4. State the consequence if the boundary is crossed. This is not a threat, it is information, and it sounds like this. If this happens again, I will leave the conversation. If this continues, I will need to step back from this commitment. The consequence must be something you are actually willing and able to follow through on. An empty consequence is worse than no consequence because it teaches the other person that your boundaries are negotiable. Step 5. Follow through every time. The boundary is set not in the statement, but in the follow through. The first time your boundary is tested, and it will be, follow through consistently. That is everything. Wavering once tells the person that your boundary is negotiable. Consistency tells them that the boundary is non-negotiable. This is often the hardest step, but this is a step that makes the boundary real. I want to close with something people don't talk about, which is the boundaries with yourself. Commitments that you make to your own well-being that you choose to honor regardless of what is pulling against them. The boundary of not looking at your phone in the first hour of the morning, the boundary of not having conversations about work after certain times of the day, the boundary of one day per week where you don't perform or produce for anyone, the boundary of not saying yes to anything that doesn't align with where you are going. Self-directed boundaries are harder in some ways than relational ones because there is no external accountability when you cross them. But they are the most important because they are the ones that determine the quality of your inner life. And the quality of your inner life is the foundation of everything else. A boundary is not a rejection, it's a definition. It is you clearly saying, this is where I am, this is what I need, and this is what I will do if this is not honored. It is not selfish, it is self-respecting. And people who respect themselves teach others over time how to respect them. Set the boundary, follow through, and watch the quality of your relationships and your inner life transform. In my next video, we'll be moving into the money mindset, specifically why your relationship with money is almost never actually about money and what it is really about. Subscribe so that you don't miss that. If boundaries are something that you are actively working on, my 30-day transformation workbook covers day 13 and 27 on exactly this. The link is in the description. If this resonates, remember to like, subscribe, and comment. I am setting boundaries. That way you and I can hold each other accountable for making this our best and most successful year yet.